Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell. This week, for episode 43, I have Dr. Cacky Mellor joining me once again to explore what it means to live a meaningful life as we embrace our mortality and explore the concept of conscious dying. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. Hey, and we are live. So welcome to the Energetic Psyche, hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell. This week for episode 43, I have Dr. Cacky Mellor joining me to explore what it means to live a meaningful life as we embrace our mortality and explore the concept of conscious dying. A little bit about Dr. Cacky. She is a visiting assistant professor at Lesley University's Mental Health and Wellbeing Department and has a remote somatic private practice, Somatic Reclamation, working with individuals. She has spent the past 15 plus years studying the power of words on the body, mind, soul, and community. And I have had the lovely pleasure of having her as a co-host on several episodes. So I'm so excited to have you back again. For this really meaningful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always truly such a joy and so nourishing to get to share this space with you and the whole Energetic Psyche community. And I'm especially excited to dive into our topic today, which is so near and dear to my heart.
I know. And, and I just want to say right in the beginning, like, people think about death and dying as like this really big, scary, dark thing. And it really isn't. It can be sad. Like, I'm probably going to cry half this episode, I think, because I'm a Lakey person and this is big stuff. It's meaningful stuff. It's important stuff. But, in the conversations we've had about this already, being able to recognize and accept our mortality is so important for the way that we lead our lives. And so, like, I just want to say that up front, that this isn't all about like death and dying and funerals, but this is really about how thinking about a conscious death, thinking about our mortality, embracing that can change the way you live your life for the better, can help you get clarity around what it means to live a meaningful life.
Yes. And with all of that in mind, I really want to encourage folks as they're listening to meet this episode where you're at. You don't have to force it. You don't have to listen to it all in one go. To honor where you're at in your journey with embracing life and death and the whole cycle, and take your time with it, because like you're saying, it is big stuff and it has a gravitas to it, and it doesn't have to be you don't have to do it before you're ready. I'll put it that way. And be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, be loving with yourself, because that's a really necessary part of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And you don't have to do it in one big chunk either. Little bits, small bites, baby steps, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, and one of the kind of cool things in that regard is that this process of embracing life and conscious dying doesn't end until your last breath.
Right. Yep.
So absolutely. Even if you are trying to like do it in big chunks, like there's always going to be some more work to do.
Constant evolution that is afforded to us by our daily lives. Yep, absolutely. So how do we start with this, Dr. Cacky?
Yeah. Well, part of why I really wanted to do this episode is because of a meaningful experience that I had when I was a student at Pacifica and we had a course in conscious dying.
Yeah.
And when I was accepted, I'd started at Pacifica. I was still in my first year. Conscious dying wasn't until middle of second year, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe end of second year, something like that. And I had gotten the whole curriculum and I was so excited because I was like, oh, that class sounds amazing. And oh, embodied alchemy, that sounds amazing. I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. And then there's this class, it's like death, illness, and conscious dying. And I was like, why? Like, why? Like, why?
I remember seeing it and being like, can't we just talk about trauma?
Right, exactly. I was like, can we just do another trauma class?
Right, like that says something about our culture right there, that we would rather talk about trauma than death.
Yeah. Well, and because I'm a brat, I got really upset about this. And I was like, we're doing a somatics program. Like, why are we talking about death? That seemed like it's so funny now, but I was so revved up about it. And I got my entire cohort revved up about it. And we like petitioned the chair. We were trying to get the curriculum changed because the cohort behind us was getting different classes that I wanted instead of this class. And I was like, I don't want the death class. I want to do like embodied group dynamics, like whatever. And I got everyone on board with pushing back against this. And fortunately, ultimately, because we were accepted under the curriculum that we were accepted in, that's what we were promised. We had to do the conscious dying class.
You know what it reminds me of is like when you're faced with like a life lesson and you're like pleading to like your guides, your gods, your spirits, whatever, like, but I don't want to do this. Don't make me do this. And they're like, it's for your own good. Just go through it. And you're like, no. And then you do, and you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
All right. Thanks. Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I was all like PO'd that I had to take this class, and going into it, I had kind of like accepted defeat a little bit. I was like, okay, I have to take this class. Like, might as well get something out of it, but like, we'll see. Like, I was like, we'll see. And the universe was definitely like, yes, you will. Because I was so disarmed the first day. The professor,
was it Stephen?
Stephen, yeah. I can't remember Stephen's last name right now.
I don't remember.
Incredible human being.
Yeah.
And the way that he approached the course is very similar to how we're kind of contextualizing this conversation, is that through intentionally cultivating a relationship with death, with mortality, we're actually opening up a intentional, meaningful way of living our lives. Because we're not putting off living till some mythical later time when all of the stars will align and you know, you're rich and you have time and you don't have a whole to-do list and blah, 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 and everything's perfect. And now you can finally live the life that you've always wanted to live. It's like, no, like the conditions will never be perfect. And you aren't promised anything. You aren't promised anything more than exhale. So what are you going to do to make your life meaningful each moment? And I also really was captivated by this concept that death or dying can be an essential part of healing. And this really, it was so radical for me, coming from, you know, a very Western allopathic approach to healthcare, and kind of that model based on curing in our medical systems of trying to return someone to a prior state of health,
Right.
to cure them, to treat and manage the symptoms. And I knew that healing was so much more than that before this class. But in the class, we really had an opportunity to learn about, experience, live into how much healing can take place in a good death and a good life.
Yeah. I remember being really taken aback by him because he was the first man that I had ever met that was really emotional.
Yeah.
Like he was very emotional.
Class, yeah.
Yeah, and I had him the year before you, and it was his very first class. And so he was a little nervous. And he read this beautiful poem and all of us were crying. And I remember just like him talking about working in hospice.
Yeah.
And I remember like thinking like, God, out of all the people to teach a class on conscious dying and looking backwards from death onto living a meaningful life, what a perfect professor for this, right?
Yeah.
To be with someone that's with death every day, and in a way that like he obviously held the beauty of it.
Yes.
Like he very much like honored and loved, like to the point where like I was like, man, if I'm ever in hospice, I hope I get somebody like him. Because I was just very struck by that. I don't think I had ever met anyone like him before that day.
Yeah, I so resonate with that. I certainly had never met a man like that.
Right.
To have that, that embodiment of such a reverent, caring, tender, masculine person leading this class was really a profound and a healing experience in and of itself for me, just to get to be in that learning environment. Can I read one of the poems that he shared?
Yes. And then, so I'm just going to ask you too, like, I think the biggest moment for me in that class was the meditation he did with us around imagining our own death. And like, are we going to share that? Are you going to share yours?
Oh, you can share. We did so many things in that class that I would love to share. But yeah, do you want to share that one?
Yeah, but go ahead, read your poem first.
Okay. Okay, so since we were talking about healing versus curing, this is the poem called The Cure by Albert Hofstadter. We think we get over things. We don't get over things. Or say we get over the measles, but not a broken heart. We need to make that distinction. The things that become part of our experience never become less a part of our experience. How can I say it? The way to get over life is to die. Short of that, you move with it. Let the pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in and be then not any less pain, but true to form. Because anything natural has an inherent shape and it will flow towards it. And a life is as natural as a leaf. That's what we're looking for. Not the end of a thing, but the shape of it. Wisdom is seeing the shape of your life without getting over a single instant of it.
Beautiful. Very lovely. Very lovely. Yeah. You know, in thinking about today's show, I was reflecting quite a bit, and like I mentioned briefly about like my skydiving experience, which I can talk about again later. But I think I'm a little unique in the fact that I've been ready to die for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because I almost died when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes things.
Mm-hmm.
See, here I go. But it really does, because once you've come very close to death,
mm-hmm.
you realize how wildly precious life is.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, a lot of people will look at the life I've lived and the crazy ass shit that I do, which I'm considering. I'm considering a motocross trip to Patagonia right now.
Sounds about right.
Right. And it's like, what? But for me, it very much is connected to that. Like, I don't know how long I have on this planet, and I want to live every day the best way that I can. And so I'm a big yes person. If an opportunity pops up, I weigh the choices pretty quickly, and then I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Because I don't know how long it's going to be there. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and I take advantage of that. And so for a lot of my life, I've been the type of person that's ready to die. Yeah. And I don't think, a lot of us are. Like the skydiving thing. I went skydiving, and I was actually very nervous. It was a decision made within less than an hour. Like, we were driving around is when I was in the military, and we all got our tax refunds. So we were, young kids, early 20s with a few $100s, if not probably $1,000.
That's where we were skydiving. Which one are we going to do?
We were going to honestly go horseback riding. And then it fell through. And so we're literally just driving around in the country in California, in the Bay Area. And someone's like, oh, we should go skydiving. We all start laughing. And then she's like, there's actually like a place not far from here. And we're all like, should we call them? And so we did. And they were like, yeah, if you can get here in an hour. That's how it happened. So I get there, and then I'm a little nervous. I'm in the jumpsuit and all that. And so I literally am like bouncing up and down because I am afraid I'm going to cry. And I got strapped to a person because we did tandem. And as we're in the plane, 20,000 feet above the world, it dawns on me that I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Because that's what I ask myself a lot when I get real nervous about something. Worst case scenario, and are we okay with this? And I was like, worst case scenario, I'm going to die. Worst case scenario, right? I mean, honestly, worst case scenario, I bounce, break up a lot of shit, and then have to live in a wheelchair forever.
That's more worst case scenario for me.
Yeah, but I went with death, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, if I die skydiving, I actually feel pretty good about that, because I died doing something I love, doing something I enjoyed, and everyone will be like, oh, Adrian, all right. It's just what it is. So I stopped shaking. And my instructor, who's literally strapped to my body so he can feel me, right, is like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you just stopped shaking. I'm like, oh, yeah. It's because I realized if I die, it's totally cool. And he was like, whoa, not going to die. And I'm like, no, I get that. Like, I know the chances are really small, but if I do, I accept it. I'm down. And he was like, what? And I was like, just go with it, man. It's fine. So I was I think I had just gotten back from Southeast Asia. So I was 22 years old. I was a kid, and I was already like, it's cool if I die. And for me, I have checked in here and there, if I died tomorrow, how would I feel about that? Right. And I think, it's not a common way to live your life unless you have faced mortality at a young age.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, as I mentioned, that meditation that he led us through, it took me to a different place.
Our faculty member led us through, not your skydiving.
Yeah, no. We're away from skydiving now. Yeah, because even though I had faced mortality, early, and was like, yeah, it's okay if I die. It's okay if I die. I really was just doing a bunch of crazy shit. It made it so that I didn't say no to a lot, because I'm like, I don't know how long I have. Let's go. But it didn't impact the quality of the life I was living, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
And I think a lot of military veterans end up in that space where, because we've faced mortality, in a heavy way, especially combat veterans, we get back and it's like, we're just saying yes to whatever, and we're doing all this crazy stuff, and we get labeled as like adrenaline junkies, but I don't know that that's necessarily the only thing going on there. But in the meditation that Stephen led, from what I recall, I mean, this was a while ago now, right? He asked us to imagine the perfect death, like how we would want to die. And like, again, just so many tears because it's so beautiful. But like, it was a totally different experience than I would have imagined.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about like guided meditations, is that it allows the unconscious, because it's really, I mean, it's active imagination, guided meditation, they come together, but it allows the unconscious mind to come forward and pour like our heart's truest desires. And mine was on a ranch, laying on like a chase lounge in the sun with kids running everywhere. And I remember thinking like, I don't have any kids and I don't want them. Whose children are these? But like, and there were animals running, like dogs and like, I think maybe goats. I don't even fucking know. But I was like on a ranch and there were animals and kids and everyone was laughing. And I just like fell asleep in the sun. And I was like, perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And up until that point, I had been living a very isolated individual life. I was very happy. Like I was enjoying myself. But I really wasn't big on finding a relationship or connecting with someone until that. Because then it's made me look at the quality of the life I was living. Yeah. And it really started to impact the way I looked at relationships and the people that were in my life versus just the opportunities. Yeah. Which I think is one of the things that death like that, or a moment like that, can bring us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that profound experience. And I resonate with so much of what you shared. And it's funny, I'm also a lover of skydiving. I don't know if we've talked about that.
We haven't.
Yeah. Skydiving a bunch of times.
Oh my God.
But it's interesting because part of the conscious dying class helped me to become more aware of why I was utilizing extreme life experiences like skydiving as a release valve to feel alive, to feel like a extreme sense of being alive, to counter some of the extreme intense trauma experiences that I had encountered, I had lived through, and particularly with chronic illness, which led to a lot of chronic disassociation. Those types of extreme life pushing, death defying experiences, I was unconsciously seeking those out as a corrective experience of all of these times that I did almost die, and it wasn't really in my control, but it was in my control to strap myself to somebody and jump.
That actually makes so much sense. It's a life affirming, right, experience.
Yeah. It was life affirming, and just that sense of really truly being alive. And it was definitely a bit of a almost addictive experience for me, because the first time I did it, it was I felt high sober for like a month after the first jump.
Same.
Where it was just like the lights had been turned on. Everything was just a little bit more vivid, a little bit more like food tasted more brilliant. The colors were, the textures were, everything was just like the volume had been readjusted from like grayscale into like vivid Technicolor. And it kind of unpacking all of this through the conscious dying class, I realized how much of my life I wasn't living.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Where I was in this going through the motions, trying to avoid pain, trying to manage pain, trying to get to that mythical where everything's going to line up and I can finally start really living my life way of approaching. And I was just, watching the days tick through and feeling the urgency of a really toxic job that I was in at the time and kind of trading off where I was actually being nourished and fed on a soul level. And I was getting that at Pacifica. And it was just bringing all of these things into my awareness in a way that I couldn't unsee it after I had seen it. And there's a Thich Nhat Hanh quote that we're all alive, but only a handful of us are really living. It's kind of the gist of the quote. Yeah. And so I started to just dive in as deep as I could into the material that was being offered to us. And it awoke all of this curiosity of what does it actually mean for me to be fully alive? Mm-hmm. What does that look like? What is happening in my life? What choices am I perpetually making that are getting in the way of that? What am I clinging on to that I think that I need to live that maybe I don't? Yeah, I'll just pause there because I want to hear from you.
Yeah, no, because I completely hear what you're saying. And I think that is the beauty of embracing our mortality, right? Yeah. Is like reevaluating the quality of our life. I mean, I was just having a conversation with someone the other day they were waiting for X to start Z, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, you could keep waiting for that, and that's fine. I said, but that's always going to be there. Yeah. So you can start this. Like, so for example, well, I'm going to wait until my kids graduate from high school to go back to school myself. And it's like, and that wasn't the thing, but this is an example. And it's like, well, yeah, you could do that, or just start taking one class at a time. And eventually it's going to add up. The time's going to pass whether you do anything in it or not. Right. And you get to choose if you're going to actively work towards something that's meaningful for you. Because even just taking that one class is going to change the quality of your life. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's just the problem is too many of us wait. Again, I have a different perspective because I faced my own mortality so young. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm about to be 45 and just, holy shit, less than a month. What? Okay. Anyway. So I'm about to be 45, which I get excited about because, again, I do it different because I'm like, fuck yeah, I made it this far. Right. Woo, right? Like it's a celebration for me. Yeah. Instead of like, oh, how old I am. It's just like, no, like my body hurts really bad because I've beat it up so hardcore in my life doing amazing things and I'm still here and I get to keep doing it.
And you've lived so much life in 44 years and 11 months.
Right, exactly. But like in my late 30s, early 40s, I had 5 friends die. Yeah. My age, which is insane, right? Like I think we all, especially once we start getting into this like area of middle life, because like, oh my God, I'm totally like there, which is wild to me. People start dying more often. And we think like, but that's what old people do, and then it starts happening and you're like, wait, what? And like my friends died of cancer. My friends died of a heart attack. I had a friend that got stung by a fucking bee. on a hike. He didn't know he was allergic. He was like 40 years old. He didn't know he was allergic, and he was hiking alone and got stung by a bee, I think in the throat, right? And he died. It was like wild. Who could have predicted that? You know, my friend's heart attack. I mean, he didn't have a great diet. So maybe we could have predicted it. But even then, like, there's people that live like to 80 that way. Yeah. So I do see things a little bit different because I've faced so much of it. But I think, so for those of you who are listening or watching and haven't faced mortality at the level I have, for example, an exercise like Stephen did with us, I think is so beautiful because it gives you the opportunity to face your own mortality in a safe and contained way with reflection back, right? So like I would invite anyone listening or watching, like, to take some time and, you know, if you want, light a candle, make it a whole thing. And then just sit for a few moments and think about, like, what would be your perfect death? Where would you be? What would you be wearing? What would the environment be like? Who would be around you? Like, what would be the perfect way for you to go? You know? And I think, like, again, that exercise was so meaningful for me because it helped me not just say yes to crazy shit, but actually look at the quality of my life.
Yeah. And another piece that I'll add on, well, two more pieces that I'll add on to that is, one, the emphasis that you're putting on the quality of life is really resonating with me, because yes, there's the kind of imagining the perfect death, what all that would entail. But for me, the most important part is, what does it feel like? How is everything in alignment for you? What do you want to feel? Ooh, now I'm getting emotional.
Welcome. My crying club.
In those final moments, because that is such important information and can be such a moment, a piece of clarity and an opportunity to act as a bellwether, a compass of, are you making your big and small decisions in an alignment that is moving you closer to that feeling?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I woke up and was like, shit, I don't have any kids. Whose kids are those? Like, who's hanging out with me when I'm, you know, and the other thing too is, like, the age that I was at, right? Like, I've often thought, like, I don't want to get old and infirm. I don't want to end up in a wheelchair. I don't want, you know, like, for me, a big part of feeling alive is being able to be in my body. Like, that's huge for me. And so in my reflection, we'll call it, I was old, like old and infirm. Like, I was laying in this Chase lounge because someone helped me put my body there. Right. So I think that was also another thing that was interesting for me, is like, I want to live that long. So if I want to live that long, what else do I need to change about the way that I care for myself in order to get to that space, you know? And then I think manifesting wise, energy wise, when we start putting that energy out and we're really thinking about this, you know, we're putting that out into the world, and those things are going to come back and help support that same vision, which is also, again, powerful and important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a kind of almost like a ripple effect of all of these questions, because what does a meaningful life mean to you, to me? What does quality of life mean? What does health mean? All of these are such intimate, personal, individual questions, and it's not going to, like, no two people are going to have the same answers. And we're often, I know because I'm the kind of person who will talk about death on the first date. I've literally done that. But I have these conversations with people because it is so important to me, and I care about the people that I'm interacting with. So I want to have a meaningful connection. And a lot of folks assume that their loved ones know what they want.
Right. Right.
If they can't make decisions for themselves, they assume that their loved one knows what type of life-saving measures they would want, the types of decisions that would be made, what kind of quality of life would be meaningful that they would want to live and continue on, and what would not be. And that's something that I really caution folks to question those assumptions, because what you might want is not necessarily going to be intuitive to another person, and it might not be what they want for you. So having those conversations when you have the capacity and the mental clarity to do that is also such a beautiful conversation and an opportunity. I remember part of my final project for the conscious dying class, I made a living will, and I had those hard conversations with folks who I was like, would you be my health proxy? If I can't make decisions, would you do that for me? This is what I would want. Are you comfortable doing that? I know it's a lot to ask. And I remember I took my best friend on a pizza date to have this conversation. And we were sitting at a outdoor table in New Haven, Connecticut. And we had gotten like garlic mashed potato pizza, which is like a big staple in Connecticut. And I was telling her about the conscious dying class and how much I was getting from it and how meaningful it was and everything. And I started having this conversation, asking her if she would be willing to do it and what that would entail. And we're just bawling, like telling each other, just like crying into this pizza. And the poor server keeps coming over and just being like, is everything okay?
You're like, we're fine.
We're alive. It's beautiful.
Right. Exactly.
And you know, it was a tough conversation, but it was such a beautiful conversation. And it also is something that's an ongoing conversation, because what I wanted 8 years ago when I had that conversation is not necessarily what I want now. It's not necessarily the same people who I want making those decisions. But it is such a peace of mind to know that my wishes are known by the folks who will honor those.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you're inspiring me to redo mine. Because you're right. I mean, those kinds of conversations, it is important. And I think too, just having those is another exercise in us reflecting on the things that we want in life and what's meaningful. Because until we think about it at that level, we often, it can be easy to ignore. And, you know, and also, so as a coach, one of the things I work on a lot with my clients is, what is your idea of success? What is a successful life? And because I deal with a lot of women who are coming into the middle of their life, is usually when we start to go, oh, wait, that one's not mine. Like that idea of success was planted there. It's not actually what I want. And I think, you know, you could easily change out the question of like, what's your idea of a successful life with what's your idea of a meaningful life?
Yes.
Right? Like, how do you know that you're succeeding? How do you know you're winning at life is leading a meaningful life? And there is so much unpacking that needs to be done and so many layers that need to get pulled back culturally, especially for women, when it comes to really what is meaningful to them personally.
Yeah.
So I think like reflecting on some of these questions that are so big and so deep and a little scary is important because it allows us to connect to our inner selves versus the culturally created, perfectly manicured shell that a lot of us exist in.
Yeah, so well said. And in my private practice, I work with a lot of folks who either are coming to me specifically for existential dread, or that's part of what's coming up for them around their trauma healing journey. And oftentimes folks are so scared. And I so deeply honor and respect that. And it's so interesting because I'm noticing a pattern of folks being like, well, I'm sorry to put this on you. I know this is really heavy. And I'm not scared. I'm not scared of wherever we're going to go with this existential experience and exploring their mortality and what the meaning and all of these things are.
It's like, don't worry, give me your bags. I'll hold them.
Right.
Let's go. We're together.
This is exciting for me that you are willing to lean into these questions. And to me, that's really showing that you're leaning into life, that you're leaning into wanting to be fully alive and to figure out what that means to you. And I'm honored to be a part of that process. And I've done a lot of my own existential work. I've had a lot of near-death experiences, like similar to what you're describing. I'm not scared of it. There are times when things come up, and that's often an invitation for me to come back to this clarity, to these compasses of like, what are my values? What am I doing? What decisions am I making that are in alignment with that or not in alignment with that? What nudges, corrective choices, points do I need to make to get closer to living that life fully alive? And how can I support others in doing that? Because going back to your invitation for folks to light some candles and explore what a perfect death would be for them, you don't have to do it alone.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of like people like us doing this kind of work, is that like I said, like, yeah, give me your bags. Let's go. Like I often talk about myself like a guide, like, and I, again, I just feel so grateful that people are like willing to invite me on their journey.
Right.
When people come to work with me, it's not like I'm there to fix them because that's bullshit. People aren't broken and I'm not fixing anybody. I'm there to hold the lantern as we walk into the dark, into this scary ass place. Like I'm here to hold your hand or help you with your luggage. If you got a lot of baggage we got to work through, right? Like I'm a guide and I'm there on that journey because I've been to the dark places. I've seen some shit. And, I was like, I mentioned the motocross trip. I'm so excited about this, but it's a motocross trip. It's an all women crew going through Patagonia, right? On Enduro cross bikes. And I was like, shit, can I? And you have to fill out this whole application. And one of them was like, how would you be an asset to the team? And part of what I wrote up, I was like, people have told me that I have Queen Latifah energy. And I was like, basically, I got you. I'm not scared. It's going to be okay. And we're going to figure it out. And that's like kind of how I've shown up for, I don't know, ever. Because I went into dark shit really early in my life. And I've been figuring it out ever since. And I'm the oldest of 6 kids. So I got you. And we're going to get there and we're going to make it work, because it can be really scary. And so, like you said, you don't have to do it alone. That's why people like me and you exist, is to help others who are ready, but maybe a little timid, maybe a little concerned.
Yeah.
And I think I also just want to say too that like, and I know that you work in a similar way, that you don't always have to jump into the pool. You can tickle your toes at the water line for a little bit, and you can slowly wade in and then even come out and then go back in again. And that's okay,
Yeah. And I think with that, another thing that became very clear for me in the conscious dying class was that it gets to be a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that I could choose to stay in the job that I was in at the time that was miserable, if that was my choice. But I wanted to make a different choice. And so I started putting the steps into motion to prepare to do that. And it's not, it doesn't have to be a radical, everything has to change right now, this minute. But what's the next small, sweet step? And sometimes it's staying exactly where you are.
Right. And it's just a mindset shift or the willingness to see things through a different lens. Yeah. I tell people all the time, this doesn't mean go quit your job tomorrow. Right. like slow down, because that is going to traumatize the shit out of you probably. Right. So like slow down, take a breath. And what is the one small thing that we could change today? And sometimes it's just changing the lens of the way we view something, not even everything, but a thing. And it's incredible how those little things can make a huge difference in your life.
Yeah. And, we were talking before we hopped on the call about just life and things that are unfolding. And I, not jokingly, was like, no, I'm just going to live my life as if my very existence is an act of rebellion. And that's not to say that I'm making outrageous choices, although maybe to some people I am, but it's more about living from that place of like radical integrity and radical agency and self-knowing and awareness, and really leaning into all of these practices that we're talking about in this episode. We've talked about in previous episodes about how to tend to soul and to meaning and to purpose in a way that it's not affected by what's happening outside, but it's what's within my control. And I think a lot about one of my very favorite books of all time, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
By Viktor Frankl. And how there's so much that's not in our control in life. But like you're saying, the lens through which we see the world and how we tend to life and life affirming experiences within us and between us cannot be underestimated. There's so much power in that.
Just showing up and just being willing to be brave enough to show up as you are can be enough to create insane rebellion and change in the world. Right? In a world that's trying to have us all conform to a certain image, just having the courage to be who you are is a fucking rebellion, right? That just showing up the way that you are is enough to make significant change in the world. Because here's the thing, I'm going to go spiritual on us for a second, but we are all these beautiful, unique, and fantastic little creatures, okay? And we all contribute to this gorgeous ecosystem of a community that we have. But if we are not being true to who we are and we're fitting into these little molds, we are denying that community the joy and resource of our gift, like we all have something to contribute. And so when we show up as our authentic self, we're really giving the best that we have to the community that we're a part of,
Mm-hmm.
whether they realize it or not. We are, and I encourage everyone to do that. And I also want to say just a little bit, in addition to that, based on the conversation that we were having before we went live, is that in that, remember that you are part of a community. Right? So when you're connecting to your authentic self and you're showing up in the world as your authentic self, don't make it a screw you, this is who I am, meh, 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 meh. Because the whole point of it is that you showing up that way, you're a resource to that community, right? So finding a way to be in compassion for those who don't understand, which can be really, really hard. Really hard. I get it. Right? But it's better for you to try and find a way to be in that space. But yeah, so just making it less about a fuck you and more about a yay me. I think it's right there.
Yeah, really, it's a yay us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. A yay us.
Yeah. Looking at the time, there's a few more resources that I want to offer to folks. If you're interested in diving more into this topic, there's so many books. Oh my God, there's so many books I want to recommend. Definitely Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl is a super powerful one. When Breath Becomes Air is a really beautiful book by Paul Kawithin, I believe is his last name. I'm not sure. Might be getting the last name incorrect there. Beautiful book about a surgeon, a young surgeon who then becomes a cancer patient and has a profound, life-changing healing journey as he's dying. Beautiful, beautiful book. A Year to Live by Peter Levine, Stephen Levine, which is a year-long. It's intended. It's a short book, but it's intended to be read over a year. A year-long meditation on if you knew a year from tomorrow you're going to die, how would you live your life? And again, it's not a fuck you, I'm gonna do whatever I want, hedonistic approach to life, but truly how would you spend every precious moment of that year? Because there is nothing promised. So why aren't you already living life as if it is as precious and sacred?
And I think that question is the one that's most common or more often asked when it comes to how we're living our lives versus the imagine your perfect death, right? Is if you have a year, what would you do?
Right. Yeah. And that's also a really cool one because there's a lot of book clubs where folks will get together in community and read that book.
Wow. Yeah.
So you have support.
Give me goosebumps.
Yeah. Maybe you and I should do that.
Right? I'm maybe that was a sign hey.
Yeah, that's another really fantastic. And I think there's also so many incredible poets that speak to this in a way that it is hard for our linear English language to capture sometimes. And one of my very, very favorite poets, Andrea Gibson, is been in treatment for terminal cancer for a number of years now, and she's been absolutely gorgeous and brilliant and life-affirming in the offerings that have come out of her truly embracing, she has a terminal diagnosis. She knows that she's dying. And how to navigate that in a way that's calling them deeper into life.
Right. Well, and kind of like we said earlier, we're all dying.
Yeah.
She just knows it's going to happen a lot sooner, right? But technically, like right now, I'm dying. You're dying. We're all dying. We are not growing and getting bigger and better. We are dying because that's how it goes, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just a different way to look at life. And I think when you get that, like a terminal diagnosis, it's like more like, oh yeah, by the way, we're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're dying, like for sure, like soon-ish. You know, but I mean, we're all dying.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that, because it opens up kind of this choice point where, yes, it can be really scary. Again, I deeply honor that. And I've kind of shifted into this place of, initially it was fear and then curiosity of, but what if I leave life on the table? Like, what if there's more of my life to live that I don't live because I'm playing it safe, or because I'm getting caught up in the to-do list, or all of these things. So rather than being afraid of dying, what would it be like to explore what it could be to live while we're still here?
Accepting it. Like, I mean, what do they say? The only thing for sure is death and taxes. Like, you know, like accept your death, accept that we're dying, and set your priorities based on that. Like, what are the priorities in your life? Like, it sounds, oh, I'm going to cry again. But like my dogs, they are not going to live as long as me, right? Kills me. And I know this. And because I know that, I literally make choices in my life very differently than I would if they weren't here, because I got 7 years tops.
Yeah.
That's 7 summers.
Yeah.
7 winters, right? So there are certain things that I'll put off until they're gone, so that I can make sure that they get the best 7 summers, the best 7 winters, you know? And it's like, it makes me cry because I wish they would live longer. Yeah. But I've accepted it. I've accepted that their lifespan is shorter. It's just what it is. But because of that, we set priorities, right? For how we're going to live these 7 years that hopefully we get together, you know? And so it is, it's like, it's an acceptance of the fact that, like, yeah, we're all dying and we only have so many years left. So what are you going to do with them? What's the most important thing for you? How do you want to live that life?
Yeah. Well, and that always reminds me of a Mary Oliver poem. Huge Mary Oliver fan. And there's a line from
Wild Geese.
There's a line, it's always taken out of context of what would you do with your one wild and precious life? And it's often, you know, you go into freaking TJ Maxx, it's on a notebook. Like, it's always kind of thrown around as like a challenge of do more, like be more, like do more accomplishments, all of these things.
And that is not what she's saying.
It's not what she's saying. Because her answer to that question for herself was to stroll through the grass and be amongst the birds and the insects. Like, that was the most meaningful thing that she could do in her life. And so it, like, I just always get so curious, like thinking about what that answer could be for each person if we really took the time to allow ourselves, as you're saying, to like shed all of these cultural conditions of, I need to make XYZ number of dollars and have this house and this career and this accomplishment and this perfect spouse and 2.5 kids and all of this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that what you really want? Is that what your soul wants? And if it is, beautiful, love that for you. And if it's not, what are you compromising on a soul level for yourself to try and fit into this prescribed life that isn't yours, isn't meant to be yours?
Yep. And I just want to, like, as we're getting close to the end here, you know, we are talking about a lot of big things, and we've mentioned small things too, you know, as far as like changing the way you look at the world. But like, just as an example of something small, something like very small, is the way that I drive to a place that I'm going. So the quickest way to get there would be to take the main city streets. But if I have my dogs with me, I always take the longer ways that include more trees and nature, so they have better smells. And if it's me, I still might take the longer ways so I don't have to deal with as much traffic and stoplights and concrete jungle-ish, right? So like, that's something small, like really, really small, but it changes the quality of your life.
Yeah.
So like, yes, the big things, but also the small things. So like, if you're listening or watching, like, I just ask you, like, what is one small thing that you could change in your day that would change the quality of your life? Right? That would make it lean more towards something that's meaningful for you. Something that makes your day just a little bit more sparkly. That really just embraces the life that you're gifted with for today. You know, not even like 100 years or whatever, but like just today. Like, what can you do to be like, oh, I'm alive right now? You know, like, I mean, even like the other day, I went and got a fancy coffee at Starbucks, which I never do. I drink black espresso, right? Like, I am boring. But I went and got like one of those pecan crunch things, and I was like, oh, so good. Like, I took a sip and was like, this is like magic. So, you know, just like the little things, I think, are also like, they're just so important. Just honor the life that you're gifted, you know, and like really appreciate it like that, because every day really is a gift, you know, and all the future ones are gifts that we haven't unwrapped yet. Like, we don't know, but yeah,
I love that.
So to wrap us up, Dr. Cacky, if there was anything that you wanted to share with everyone before we sign off, what would it be?
There's one quote that I think I want to close with, just to kind of tie up a lot of what we've been discussing. And this comes from Nicola Jane Hobbs. I don't want to be lying on my deathbed thinking I lived a productive life, or I lived an efficient life, or I lived a life of compulsive busyness, joyless striving, and finished to-do lists. At the end of my life, I would like to look back and think, I lived an enchanted life, a meaningful life, a life full of beauty and tenderness and devotion.
Oh, I think this is the most I've ever cried in an episode. Oh, but again, it's because it's beautiful stuff, right? So that was gorgeous. Thank you. Yeah. Well, for everyone that has joined us and made it through with or without many tears, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we'll hear, or you'll hear or see us again in the future. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Energetic Psyche, a podcast that live streams every week, Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us again in the future. Have a great week.